Good Wednesday evening. Welcome to Overtime here on WOTM. I am Gerhard Mathangani, joined by our expert researcher / historian, Mark Everett Kelly. We got a lot of Super Bowl news to drop on you, and we got some trivia as well. We will also be joined by our friends from the great state of New York, Errol and Speedy. We had them on a little bit earlier in the year. We'll have them back again for their Super Bowl breakdown. But first, Mark, let's start in the world of college basketball. The state of Alabama has had a really good run overall. We take a look at the entire spectrum of D1 Division I basketball teams. None better than Auburn. However, Auburn last night losing their first SEC game on the road, a hostile environment at Arkansas. What'd you make of the Auburn Tigers, #1 going down in Fayetteville?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was subbing over at White Plains Middle School, as a history teacher, Mr. Cruz, he was saying, he's a big Auburn fan, he'd say, man, I'm really worried about this game against Arkansas. And you saw it coming a little bit. When the way they played against Missouri and against Georgia, where they only winning by 2 points against Georgia, only winning by 1 point against Missouri. Those are two teams only have 4 wins in conference play combined. So Georgia especially, that game would have bothered me as an Auburn fan because only one conference win. You really should dominate that team. But things went bad, but they were able to pull it out in the end because they have a smart overall IQ team. Basketball IQ. You saw Wendell Green being able to take it end to end, get the game-winning basket. Against Arkansas, there's a number of things that they haven't done well on the road. Number one, you saw Wendell Green at the end of the game pulling up for a three-pointer when maybe he should have penetrated. They're not getting as many assists per game, and they're not getting as many free throws per game. So they're not penetrating. They're not doing the pick and rolls like they used to early on in the season. Kessler is great at that. I mean, they're able to take advantage of his height on those things. They haven't done that as well against Georgia. They didn't do that as well against Missouri, and they certainly didn't do it last night during crunch time against Arkansas. When you consider 3 for 10 from the free throw line in the second half and overtime, not only weren't they getting to the free throw line, but they weren't making their free throws either.
Exactly, and it's one of the things that you pointed out here. We'll take a look at Auburn. During the course of their last 3 games, it's been a thing here on the road, not being able to get to the free throw line, and you also see the differential in assists as well, and how it's resulted. Of course, last night was their first loss, but they've been towing that line for the last few games on the road.
Yep, at Missouri, Georgia, and Arkansas, they combined 46 free throw attempts compared to 73 for their opponents. Only 26 assists in those games compared to 35 for their opponents. Wendell Green only 11 assists, total assists in those games, when he had 16 total assists at Alabama, at Ole Miss, and at South Carolina early on in the season. And this guy, Wendell Green, is player of the week going into yesterday, averaging over 15 points per game in conference play. Only 9 for 21 shooting last night, including 1 for 7 from three-point range. A big reason why they weren't able to win. And he wasn't penetrating as much as he normally does. That's why their assist numbers were down as well. But then you look at Jabari Smith, only 5 points against Missouri and Georgia on 4 for 22 shooting last night. Kept him in the game, hit those 2 big three-pointers at the end of the game, 20 points on 6 for 18 shooting, 3 for 8 from three-point range. And then you have Kessler, 16 points per game, 10.5 rebounds per game, over 4 per game on the offensive end, and 7 blocks per game in his shooting over 68% in his last 8 games, including a career high 19 rebounds last night, 8 offensive, kept him in the game until he fouled out, which was a big moment in overtime, and from there you saw Arkansas start to take over.
Exactly. Auburn is a team that we know is getting into the tournament. I think the thing for them is not only trying to get a #1 seed, but maybe the #1 overall seed. We talk about Alabama, and this is a team that I don't know if necessarily a lot of people are as confident, maybe willing to put down an amount of money that might scare them a little bit, as they might have been 2 or 3 months ago about being in the tournament. You still see them in. Talk about the teams out of the SEC, and do you still have as much faith in this deep league as you did before?
Well, Alabama's should be in, at least if they don't totally fall apart, because they have 6 quad 1 wins, which is up there among the most among teams in Division I basketball. So they should be in right now. Jerry Palm has Mississippi State in right now, so they're our team that could be in as far as the last 4. They're 5-4 overall in SEC play, and they have some big wins, but they still got to be able to be more consistent, maybe stay over 500 in conference play, and then get a win or so in the SEC tournament. That'll go a long way to getting them off the bubble. Florida is a team right there on the bubble. They have bracketology has them on ESPN, has them in among the last 4 teams. I still think they're not as good as Mississippi State, even though I have Mississippi State on the bubble. Most brackets have Florida, and I really don't understand why, because they've been inconsistent all year too. The bottom half of the SEC, as far as the teams like Florida, like Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt, which has big games coming up at Tennessee and at Auburn.
Right.
If they're able to win those games, then I think they have a shot to get right back into it too. So, but when you look at the top half of the SEC, Kentucky's playing great. And talking about Alabama, holding Alabama to 3 for 29 from three-point range. Talking about Kentucky winning 9 of the last 10 games, holding opponents to under 70 points per game, and 30% shooting from three-point range. Sheedway, which could be Conference Player of the Year and National Player of the Year, averaging 15.9 rebounds, 15.9 points, 15.1 rebounds, 18 double-doubles. We're talking about a monster guy.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought Bediako played him well when Alabama played them, but this is just a brute who gets every loose ball. And Kentucky is really taking his lead. Ty Washington's also a very good freshman. I don't think he's at the level of Jabari Smith, but it's close.
Right.
But then you also notice J.D. Davidson for Alabama. Since the great Gonzaga game, he's only averaging 7.3 points per game and shooting under 40%.
Yeah.
And just like the rest of Alabama, Shackelford, since that scoreless game against JSU, he was averaging over 18 points per game, but then he comes out and scores 6 points against Kentucky.
Right.
Can't shoot the ball, just like all Alabama couldn't shoot the ball against Kentucky. That was a big game for them at home that they lost. Usually they've been unbeatable at home.
Right.
And that's the big difference between last year and this year. I think they miss Herb Jones. They miss his leadership. I think Quinterly and Shackelford, they're just a little inconsistent. J.D. Davidson, as a freshman, has got to be a little more inconsistent, too. Only 3 double-digit scoring games in his last 18 games.
Exactly, and it's really hard to ask a true freshman to really step up, but it's really a microcosm of Alabama's offensive woes in general. They haven't been able to score the ball with as much consistency as they normally have, but Coach Oates is really quick to point out they are still one of the top 10, top 15, maybe top 20 teams overall when it comes to efficiency. So maybe, hopefully, in their case, they could be able to turn that thing around. Thank you so much for your insights there. We'll talk about some Super Bowl insights. We'll also have our friends from the Big Apple coming up next here on Overtime.